Hello and welcome to this training about functional spirituality. My name is Ava. I'm the founder of Spunda School in Fremantle, and this philosophy I'm going to share with you today is going to blow your mind in terms of what a dysfunctional spiritual practice is and one that can truly support both healing and awakening. So I want to share with you the story about my spiritual journey and the burnout that I experienced about 7 years ago. So I started yoga when I was quite young. At 19, I was practicing Bikram yoga in Sydney. And shortly after that, I started following a Buddhist teacher, doing retreats, and ended up in a yoga community in Thailand, which ended up being a sex cult. But I spent 6 years there teaching and practicing fervently. So I was practicing 8 to 10 hours a day, spending 10 days at a time each month in silence. I was doing dark retreats, so going into a light-proof room for 7 days at a time, fasting, rituals, meditation, yoga, lots of esoteric practices. So I was living in this community and I was fully absorbed into and immersed in this spiritual practice. And soon I became one of the senior teachers there. I was known for having a really strong meditation and spiritual practice. I became a well-loved teacher. I was recognized in the community. Then I came home to Australia and opened up Spunda School, so our yoga studio in Fremantle. And again, was the leader of the community, was running silent retreats and yoga teacher trainings. And then in 2018, I burnt out. I had a full-blown mental health crisis where I could barely even function. So my system was completely fried. And after having spent so much time in meditation, building awareness, I was kind of just watching this process of my nervous system in shutdown after being so activated, so almost like hyper engaged in my life and in the business and in the community. I was suddenly not able to really perform or move. And I was very curious about this experience. How was it possible that after over 10 years of fervent practice and being recognized as someone who was practicing a lot and well, it's not like I was, drinking on the side or, so often people will blame themselves for why the spiritual practice isn't working. But I had no reason to do so. I was recognized and known internally and recognized from the outside that I was a strong practitioner. I was doing everything I was told to. And the promise was that I would be the happiest and healthiest, most enlightened, most elevated and sublime person, especially with all these esoteric practices I was doing. I wasn't just doing a 10-minute meditation practice. I was going full on. And I thought, well, this is interesting. Now I'm the most unhealthy, physically and mentally, and unhappy I've been since I started practicing. How is that possible? And I love this story because I'm this kind of extreme case of what our spiritual industry is rife with, which is ineffective practice. And even though I was at this kind of dodgy community and was revealed for having a lot of kind of toxic traits, I didn't experience anything incredibly traumatic or toxic there. It was actually just the practice was ineffective. So it took me about 3 years to really, I went really dark and down. I didn't want to come up early. I wanted to find out why was it so ineffective and how did I end up in this position? Because I'd built my whole life, my passion and business was based around helping people with the effective spiritual practice. I really wanted to find out what happened here. And very quickly, I realized that my system was riddled with complex stress and complex trauma. So the accumulation of stress in my system had eventually fully overwhelmed it and caused it to shut down. And even though I was performing in this overwhelm for so long, it took me a while to slowly build myself back up. And I kind of stumbled upon this understanding and tested it out many times, which I want to share with you as really the pillar of the functional spirituality philosophy. So in university, I had studied philosophy and had even studied Eastern philosophy as well. And nowhere had I found any evidence of this idea that spiritual practice actually has different intentions. Throughout time, throughout all of our wisdom traditions, we've always been told that all paths lead to the top of the mountain. All religions ultimately point to the same thing. And in some sense, I understand that. In an absolute sense, when we're talking about the ultimate reality, that is one. But when we're talking about spiritual practice, spiritual systems and traditions, the different tools and approaches they offer, actually they are not the same. And after kind of evaluating and looking at my own systems and my practices and my results and at my community of, over 1,000 students at that point, I realized that there are actually 3 different intentions for spiritual practice. They're always and most often conflated to be one, but there are actually 3 different intentions, which means that there are 3 different outcomes, 3 different results of the tools. And all of them are valid. Together, they make up the entirety of a spiritual practice. They need to be considered as intentions, so as desires of our system in any one point. And ideally, we know what these different intentions are, so we can choose the tools that line up with those intentions. And that's what functionality means. It means the approach that we're taking is aligned with the outcome that we desire. And like I said, most often they're all conflated as one. It's seen as like a succession. We do healing and shadow work, and that's kind of like lower work. And then slowly we cultivate more and more peace, and eventually we're enlightened. And what I realized is that there's actually these three different tracks of development. So let me share them with you now. The first outcome of our spiritual practice, the first desire or intention that we might have, is healing. And what healing means in this context, I mean it to mean a specific result. Healing means the resolving of the accumulation of stress inside of our system that is creating the experience of suffering. So in this context, because suffering means things in different contexts, different systems, they define it in different ways. In this context, suffering means pain that can be avoided. The second order of pain that we feel around natural stress. So there's natural stress, natural pain that's due to the flow of life, a natural biological response, something we share with plants and other animals. And then there's a second order of stress, stress that can be avoided, stress that is due to the way that our system responds to challenge because of the accumulation of unhelpful material in our system. So healing here in functional spirituality means the resolving of unnecessary, unhelpful material inside of our system that creates the experience of suffering. And there are tools that help us do that, great tools that help us to meet the uncomfortable material inside and to help that material to resolve, top-down and bottom-up tools. So healing is a beautiful intention, a valid intention. It's why most of us come to spiritual practices, because we want to feel better. We don't want to feel so bad. And we want to resolve that uncomfortable material inside that is creating the experience of suffering in our life. So healing is the first intention, and it's also a group of tools that facilitate that particular outcome. The second result or intention of our spiritual practice is cultivating. And this takes into consideration that we also call things our spiritual practice, tools and things and approaches that help us to grow or expand or align with different desires or goals that we have. So where healing is almost like clearing out, integrating and completing unhelpful and unresolved energy, Cultivating is about adding in things that feel truly aligned to us. It's almost like functional goal setting, revealing what's aligned with us truly and moving towards it with different tools, different forms of creativity, intelligence, relationship, love, other different positive attitudes that we might want to cultivate, trust, gratitude. So cultivating is really non-specific, and it takes into consideration that we might call that our spiritual practice as well. There are things that help us to grow, not necessarily heal and resolve, but to grow and expand in our alignment in accordance with our desires and with our goals. Healing, cultivating, and the third intention or result of a spiritual practice is transcending. And transcending in this context refers to non-duality. It refers to what's typically called enlightenment. It refers to a set of tools that facilitate an outcome of connecting to and revealing. So connecting to and revealing what we essentially are beyond a person. So where healing and cultivating are about improving the person, transcending is a outcome of spiritual practice or an intention of spiritual practice and a set of tools that help us to bypass our person and inquire, is there anything that I am that is not a person? In the non-dual tradition, it's called self-inquiry with a capital S, which can be confusing because often self refers to a person. But transcendence and self-inquiry and non-duality, awakening sometimes it's called, although awakening means different things. So I've tried to move away from the word awakening, which is what I used to call the third part. Well, now I call it transcending because it refers specifically to what's happening. It's about emotions and thoughts arise and we bypass them. We negate them and place them to the side. We let them go. Sometimes we say we surrender, we accept, we allow. We don't attend to the content. And instead we inquire, what is aware of the content? Who am I? What does the word I refer to? Because I is, of course, not a thought or emotion. We think that I is actually the accumulation of thoughts, memories, and personhood. But in this type of practice, in transcending types of practices, the nature of the approach is to ignore the content of I and inquire into the subject of I, that which is aware of my thoughts and my emotions and my body and my memories and my entire person. Because the entirety of my person, everything we could possibly conceive to be our person, can be known by me. So what am I? What's the me that is the subject of all of the objects of my awareness? And one of the objects of awareness is my subtle objects, like my mind. I'm aware of my thoughts. Or there is something that can be aware of the thoughts. What am I essentially? And these transcending techniques, there are so many that specifically work on that result. Non-dual transcending types of techniques are ones that help us to quiet the content of our awareness and become aware of the awareness itself, to become aware of the subject of our experience. They try to highlight our essential being, and they inquire always with the question, what am I essentially? And is what I am essentially infinite? All that is love, presence. What is it? Is it formless? Is it undying, unchanging? Those are a particular type of practices. And they in no way improve the person because they are not attending to the person. They're only for the mystical inquiry of what I essentially am. So what I was doing for about 10 years, I was actually part of an awakening school, a transcending school. So a lot of the work was about letting go, let it be, going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the heart of the heart of the heart of my being. negating the content. As material arises, not that, not that. There's a beautiful technique called neti, where no matter what arises, we say, not that, not that. And we say, what am I? And whatever stillness, when that arises, not that. Because I'm not anything that arises. I am what remains when everything arises, falls away, or is not attended to. So I was doing these awakening techniques, no matter what arose for me, pain, drama, emotions, discomfort, suffering, whatever arose, I would say, I would go deeper, I'd be told, go deeper into your being. And the more time you spend in the peacefulness, this is awakening teachers are Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Muji, Rupert Spira. It's beautiful philosophy. My heart is really with non-duality. I'm obsessed with these types of techniques. They're incredible and beautiful, and they truly have my heart and my devotion. However, they in no way improve the person. And I happen to be, like you, interested in my person. I want to be happy. I want to be healthy. I want to be connected. I want to be successful. I want to relate to my family and my friends and my community and to life in a way that feels fulfilling and meaningful for me. All of that is personhood. So there are if I have particular intentions, I want to relate better, or I want to be happy, or I want to be healthy. Those intentions have particular approaches. That's a functional path. We don't think that a spiritual technique from a particular guru, because it's really shiny and advertised and seems really mystical and promises us and markets to us that it is the answer to all of our problems. Just because a tool or a teacher might do that doesn't mean that it will. I'm living proof of that. I fully was cooked from my practice. After that, my awakening school promised me more in the heart space, more silence, more stillness, empty your person, and everything will heal, which is, I should have known after studying philosophy, that is logically inconsistent. How can negating my person improve my person? Well, I tried, I gave it my best effort, and that's part of the spiritual practice. The first step is to fully adopt a system, to try the techniques as if they were true, and then to evaluate the effects and to modify it for yourself. Unfortunately, I just tried them as if they were true for like 10 years instead of maybe 1 or 2. So it makes sense that I had spent so much time negating my person, bypassing my person, resting in the heart of being. I mean, I became a great meditator and I know non-duality like the back of my hand, but it made sense that I didn't heal. And my system was begging for healing. How do you know when you should heal, and how do you know when you should do transcending techniques? You should do healing when you feel uncomfortable, when your system feels like it has uncomfortable material inside. If my person feels like it's fractured, triggered, upset, uncomfortable in some ways, then we meet those parts of ourselves. So healing is about meeting ourselves, meeting that material. How these tools work is they help us to meet the uncomfortable pieces inside in the particular way that they need in order to help them to resolve. There are bottom-up and top-down ways. There's beautiful, super effective tools that help us to meet the uncomfortable pieces in a way that helps them to resolve. And it gives us almost a spiritual experience because it alchemizes those pieces into resilience and strength and capacity and resources and experience and confidence. So it's a beautiful spiritual experience, really, even though it's fully biological and nervous system based. And then transcending tools are about not meeting the pieces, about bypassing the content of our experience and bypassing those pieces to say, is there anything that I am that's not the content of my experience? So this is the 3-part method. And the 3-part method is really the foundation of the functional spirituality philosophy. The FS philosophy is something that's taken me almost 20 years to cultivate and to refine. And there are many parts within healing, within cultivating, and within awakening that come together to create this really rich philosophy. So there are a few steps from here. If you'd like to learn more about functional spirituality, you can search functional spirituality on any podcast app, Spotify or Apple, and listen to hundreds of guided meditations or free talks from me. I also offer a monthly container for people who want a little bit of one-to-one support and guidance, as well as practices with me, live and library. It's called the Living Retreat. I offer silent retreats many times a year, and the silent retreat is an opportunity to really experience spiritual practice, healing, cultivating, and awakening in a way that confirms for you exactly what it is so that you can touch back to it in your daily life. And I also offer a variety of different trainings for facilitators, yoga teachers, meditation teachers, counselors, therapists, wellness practitioners, as well as people who just are interested in holding more coherent, effective, and functional spaces in their daily life. So parents, teachers, even people in relationship who want to hold better spaces. I offer multiple facilitator trainings throughout the year as well. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear if this video touched something inside of you or if it still feels unclear. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. I have so much love and capacity for my community, you'll see. So I can't wait to hear from you how this video went. And thank you so much for listening.